This episode of the Deep Thinkers podcast is brought to you by Element Stoneworks. Element Stoneworks is a custom granite surface company. So if you are sick of the laminate in your home, or you're sick of the countertops in your bathroom, or whatever, you give Element Stoneworks a call and they can come in and custom fabricate some granite or marble or whatever hard surfaces you want on your countertops. They do bathrooms, they do kitchens, they do desktops, they do nooks, they do pretty much any surface you want covered in granite or marble or whatever kind of silestone. Give them a call, 480-290-1879, or you can reach them at 602-930-8740. Sometimes it's better to reach out to these guys on text messages. Sometimes they get back a little bit quicker to you if you text them. Or you can find them online on Facebook or Instagram at Element Stoneworks. This episode of the Deep Thinkers podcast is brought to you by Bright Island Outreach. Bright Island Outreach is a group of dental professionals and other volunteers who go down into the Dominican Republic multiple times a year and provide pro bono dental work for the people down there who need it. They network with the local dental colleges in the DR, and they take local students into these impoverished areas where they provide education, extraction, fillings, root canals, cosmetics. They do everything that you would need to do to have a nice, healthy set of chompers. They follow up with these people multiple times a year to ensure that they're getting good quality dental care. If you'd like, you can donate to them. They're on Facebook or Instagram, and you can also reach them at brightislandoutreach.org. Or if you would like to actually go down to the DR yourself and actually spend some time, you can as well. They're always looking for volunteers to accompany them. So check them out online at brightislandoutreach.org or Facebook or Instagram as well. Thank you. This episode of the Deep Thinkers podcast is brought to you by Crandall Pest Control. Crandall Pest Control was founded in 2002 and has been family owned and operated ever since. Their main bread and butter is scorpions, termites, and general pest, but they can usually handle any pest issues that you have for them. You can reach them online at crandallpest.com, or you can call them directly at 480-360-4999. So give them a call, mention the Deep Thinkers podcast, and get $30 off your first treatment. Just a few items of housekeeping before we dive into this podcast with Freddy Negrete. Thank you, everyone who has followed me on social media, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, or Snapchat, even though I'm not on it very often. Jesse Noble Smith, JESSENOBLESMITH, is pretty much my handle on everything. Also, the Deep Thinkers podcast. Between those two, you should be able to find me on everything. The most important, if you're going to follow me on just one thing, please follow me on YouTube. If you have a Gmail account, you just log in with your Gmail email address and your Gmail email address password, because Google owns YouTube, and so it's all part of the same thing. And then hit subscribe, the little red button when you're listening to this. At this point, the only platform I'm on is YouTube. So if you're listening to this, then yeah, please subscribe. I appreciate it. Also, this is a podcast about tattooing. So there are a few tattoo artists in my life that I follow. So I kind of wanted to give them some shout outs. The first one, John Hansen. John's been doing the majority of my work these days. I'm just going to give you their Instagram handles as I give them shout outs. So JohnHansenTattoo on Instagram. The second one would be Adrian Dominique. Adrian did my first tattoo, and he did a great job with it. It's a story for another day. But he's on Instagram at ADRIANDOMINIC. The third one is Rodney Taylor. He did a tattoo on my leg. It's a family crest. Love it. Super sick tattoo. Great guy. He's RodneyTaylorArt on Instagram. Third person is Carly Cleary, and she's an awesome tattoo artist and a great person. And her Instagram is KarlyCleary. And the last one that I follow is Justin Oriani, and he's JustinOrianiTattoo on Instagram. So please follow these artists on Instagram and like their comments or like their pictures and comment on them. And of course, follow Freddy Negrete on Instagram if you're not already. And thank you again for all the love you've shown me on social media. Every time I get a new follower on YouTube, I get stoked. I check that all the time. So thank you very much. I appreciate it. And here we are. Enjoy. Hello, planet Earth. I am here today with one of Los Angeles's rock star tattoo artists, Mr. Freddy Negrete. How are you doing today, sir?
Doing good. Great.
Very cool. So, how long have you been tattooing in Los Angeles?
Uh, wow. Well, professionally, I started in 1977.
Wow. Okay. So, before I was born. Cool.
Yeah. But I started before that. Uh, you know, I guess in 1970, 71, I was a hand poker, you know, in my neighborhood,
Yeah.
and
Just doing
then
some scratches and stuff and a little
oh,
bit.
actually some pretty elaborate stuff,
Yeah.
you know.
Well,
Yeah, because I learned from.
right, but I'm sorry, man. For me, like I've heard that anybody like until you've gone through the apprenticeship, you're a scratcher. So I didn't mean to like downplay it like your stuff wasn't legit or anything like that. I just, I have just a couple friends in the industry, and they're always saying like, yeah, you can be super talented, but you're still scratching until you go through and pay your dues in the shop, and then you're an artist. But
Yeah, I guess
yeah,
that's so. But in the Chicano culture where we always had our own style
yeah.
of tattooing, and it started with the hand poking, and then with the homemade tattoo machine. There
Hmm.
was a whole elaborate style involved with that whole scene.
Well, let's talk about that for a second because I know nothing about that. Like, can you just give me a little bit more info on that? Like, I mean, ham poking, obviously, you're just doing something with like a, like is that more of a traditional method, like as far as what you're referring to, or
Yeah, it's how the Chicano style developed. In the 60s and early 70s in California prison. And it was just sharpened guitar strings, a couple of them, melted into a toothbrush to kind of make like a little handle.
cool,
And uh, and you would hand poke these beautiful designs.
nice,
And the designs all had to do with important themes to the Chicano Cholo culture, like religious stuff, roses and crosses and Jesus and Mary
right?
and revolutionary stuff like Pancho Villa and Zapata
Okay,
and the Charra girl, the famous Charra girl,
is that the one
and
that is that the one that
Danny
Dan-
Trejo has.
Danny Trejo? Yeah,
That's a perfect example.
yeah,
Uh, that tattoo was done by hand in San Quentin prison.
That's a sick piece he has. Like iconic
Yeah, and it's a
for
really
him.
famous tattoo.
Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, like he says, it's probably the most famous of the Chicano style tattoos. The most seen.
Yeah, very cool. So you started out doing that in the beginning. How long did you do that before you actually went where did you go once you stopped doing that?
Well, from there, I learned. It 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 developed and progressed in prison with the homemade rotary tattoo machine,
Okay.
which was just a motor, taken from a cassette player and turned into a rotary style tattoo machine, which, by the way, today is, uh, they've made a professional tattoo machine out of the rotary, and
Cool.
it's the most used style of tattoo machine for all these youngsters today.
Oh, nice. That's crazy. And it started back with the
In prison.
Chicano culture in prison. Wow, that's cool. That's a crazy way that altered tattoo history or left a strong mark on it.
Yeah, so when uh, so I learned using a homemade tattoo machine. I got really good at it. When I got out, I kind of set up shop in my kitchen, and I
Uh-huh.
was tattooing homeboys and a lot of different people from around the neighborhood.
For sure.
And at the very same time, Good Time Charlie and Jack Rudy opened up a tattoo shop in East LA,
Yeah.
and they found that the people in East LA, the Chicano culture, they wanted their tattoos to look like they were done in prison, and
Yeah.
they wanted that prison style. And Jack and Charlie really accommodated them, and adjusted their style of tattooing to look that way,
Cool.
and they were really good at it.
Yeah.
So eventually I connected with Jack Rudy, because people I tattooed would go and show them, and I would see all their tattoos. And then when Ed Hardy bought the tattoo shop from Good Time Charlie, Ed Hardy and Jack Rudy hired me uh, as an artist,
Tight.
and I started tattooing professional. And Jack Rudy and I, and along with others, Ed Hardy and Bob Roberts and Mark Mahoney, went on to pioneer a fresh new style in professional tattooing called black and gray realism.
Yeah,
And
I'm
today it's
familiar with it.
probably,
Yeah.
yeah, and it's a worldwide phenomenon today. It's probably the most popular form of tattooing.
Yeah, that black and gray just not only does it look sharp like from the beginning, but it just ages so well on so many different types of skin tones, you know. I mean, it's, some skin tones and some skin in general just holds that color a little better where, that black and gray will always look good, like as it ages it even looks it's better, as far as the grays go,
Yeah.
they get lighter, and yeah, that's amazing. So what? Wow. So are you from the LA area then?
Yes. Yeah. I grew up in the San Gabriel Valley. It's on the east side of LA.
Cool. I lived in LA in 2001. I lived in Redondo Beach for just about a year and a half. I was doing medical software, so I'm fairly familiar with LA, more than most people from Arizona, but not as much as people who spend a lot of time out there. I'm still pretty much a novice. I moved back there 2 years ago to my buddy owns a boutique hotel in Hollywood, and he wanted me to help him run it. And it was during Oscar week, and I lasted 10 days, man. There's so many people in LA now. So how
Yeah. It's a great city. It's a
Oh,
great city.
yeah, it's a great. I love it. I just, yeah, man. Like I was sitting there. He lives up by the sign, and I'm thinking, man, this little guest house I'm living in is going to slide off this mountain in an earthquake. His mansion's going to land on top of me, and the Rock is going to have to come save me. because yeah, I'm up here with the coyotes and the hummingbirds, and that's about it. So, but beautiful city. Once you get up high in those mountains, like people that just visit LA for the city and they don't get the view of it from, like, if you don't go up to Griffin Park in that area, Beechwood Canyon, where you can kind of look down into it. Uh, there's some amazing, beautiful places in LA. It's
Yes, sir.
it's a great city. I loved living in Redondo Beach, and I love it when I go back. But I don't know if I'm quite cut out to live there, man. Especially not in Beechwood Canyon. So, h- how much has the city um, changed since you've been there? I mean, it's got to be crazy to watch all the people come in and watch it all change since you've been around.
Oh yeah, it has changed. In fact, uh, the area that I'm from is pretty much all Asian.
Yeah. Okay.
Which, I mean, to see like the stores and everything, that I grew up, like all turned into stores with Chinese writing, and it's completely changed that area.
Yeah, for sure.
In a good way. It's beautiful, and
Yeah.
it it's really diverse. But yeah, the whole city has gone through tremendous amount of change. But then again, there's those things that's always the same, you know.
Yeah. There's always the iconic landmarks and things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a cool town, man. I do love it. I have a good buddy who is in the film industry, and he's always uh, he's always traveling back and forth or telling me where he's at, and he has a good time in LA. He'll eventually move out there, but in the meantime, he's going back and forth between Arizona. His family's here, so. But yeah, a lot of big business gets done in LA. What shop are you tattooing out of these days, Freddie?
Yeah. These days I'm tattooing at Mark Mahoney's Shamrock Social Club,
Okay,
and it's an iconic shop in Hollywood. Um, Mark has long been known for his work on celebrities, and so uh, and our shop has been used in numerous movies and television shows, and
that's cool.
so yeah, and it's right on the Sunset Strip. So it's a good shop. It's very busy, and I enjoy working there a lot.
Nice. Is most of your work scheduled out, or is a lot of it walkout? Because I imagine in LA, where you have so many people coming and going all the time, you probably get a lot of demand for both.
Yeah, I just do appointments,
There you go.
and everybody has their appointments, but uh, on Saturday and Sunday it's so busy that we have like 6 artists working at once
Wow, that's a big
from
shop.
from yeah from 1 p.m. all the way to 2 a.m.
Right on. Who are some of the classic artists that, I mean, I guess with the internet, when you were coming up in the tattoo world, it was different, I mean, the internet wasn't around, but um how far
Yeah,
along in the tattoo game were you before you started having, like, OG tattoo artists that you were like, man, that guy's good, and who were some of those people?
I was always connected with the tattoo world, and the internet was definitely a game changer for us in all respects,
Yeah.
of the industry. But I've always looked up to the great artists over the years. Of course, Jack Rudy and Ed Hardy and Roberts, Mark Mahoney, Paul Booth, um, Guy Atchison. You know, and then as of late, Carlos Torres and Franco Vescovi. You know, I can go on and list
Probably
hundreds of
hundreds.
them.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
I love good tattoo work. here, I'll show you some of mine. Um, this is one John Hansen at Black Lotus Tattoo is working on for me. I wanted an Irish heritage tattoo, and so as you can see, it's not quite done yet. But um,
Oh, it's nice though.
yeah, John is he's great. He and I have a funny story. We met in high school in a drawing class, and even back then, people would gather around the table and watch him draw. And he painted cars for a while, worked on cars for a while, and one of his friends was like, "Dude, you're an artist and you love tattoos. Why don't you just do that?" And he was kind of like, "Oh yeah, that's a good idea." And so he kind of went down that road, and he's been doing great now. But um, he's working on that one for me. I got my crest on my upper thigh, but I can't really show you without taking all my clothes off. And I mean, I'd rather. I don't know if you know me that well. I don't want to come across as a weirdo. But I was gonna say, you haven't bought me a drink yet, but of course you don't drink. So, but it's a family crest that I combine my mom and my dad's crest, the Nobles and the Smiths. And Rodney Taylor in Chicago did that one for me. Um, he was awesome guy. Did a great job. And then I have this one right here. That was my first tattoo. Yep. And
Oh, cool.
it's an aquarium in the shape of a star, and the aquarium's breaking and the water's leaking out. In the center, there's a human heart, and I plan on getting sleeved up after my leg's done, and so I have a tattoo I'm going to incorporate into it, or it's going to incorporate into the sleeve pretty nicely. But Adrian Dominique did that one. He lives in Australia, either Australia or New Zealand, somewhere down south. One of those countries. But he did that out of Phoenix or Phoenix Tattoo Parlor. Um, God, this would have been like 02, 03. So I've only got three right now, but I think about my tattoos for a long time before I get them. I kind of stew over them and then kind of make the choice. So I'm usually pretty stoked when I get them because I wanted them for a while. So, but what was your first tattoo, Freddie?
My first tattoo was actually just a little line on my hand.
Yeah,
It was the first. Yeah, I was gonna write my name. It turned out to be a bit too much, but I was like 12 years old with a needle and thread, and but in that same year, my arm was covered with hand poke tattoos. That
yeah,
they're all covered now, but I
for
saved
sure.
that one tattoo to always remember
That's
the
cool.
very first tattoo I ever put on myself.
That's cool. That's a cool story, man. 12 years old and getting to it. So you knew
Yeah.
what you wanted to do pretty early on, it sounds like.
Yeah, I never knew that it would go this far.
Right.
Uh, but
You never
as a
planned on
kid,
being an icon in the industry and
yeah.
influencing millions of people across the world. That's pretty
But I
awesome.
knew that I was obsessed with it, and
Yeah,
you know um, I knew that much.
right on. So how, like, when your friend reached out to me to come on the podcast, we were talking about sobriety and about recovery. Um, how many years have you been sober now?
10 years. Just
10
December
years.
20th was my 10-year birthday.
Very
So
cool, man. A decade. That's
yeah,
that's impressive. Wow. Yeah, my
it
sister.
is until I go to meetings and meet people that have 30, 40 years clean.
Yeah, but you'll get there, man. I mean, they were all at 10 years once, looking at the guys that were 30 and 40 years clean, going, "Wow," like,
Yeah, and I'm in no rush.
right, right. No, I actually just went to a meeting a couple weeks ago. I work in downtown Mesa, Arizona, and there's a place where they hold meetings, and there's a 12 o'clock meeting. And I saw people walking into it, and I was like, it's been years since I've been to a meeting. I'm not an addict, but people who have never been to an AA meeting, um, I would suggest you go. Um, just to see how real it can get. When people are sharing and they're getting into their stories and their lifelong stories, um, man, it's there's some real, just painful realizations there that life isn't easy, and some people have had it a lot harder than other people. And there's something about the honesty of people in recovery that just floors me every time I'm around it. You know, what 10 years? Wow, that's amazing. So you've been a decade clean, and that's awesome, man. Like I take my hat off to you for that, man. That's Yeah, that's pretty awesome. So, what, if you don't mind me asking, what was your poison?
Uh, you know, mainly heroin and speed. Later on, heroin and speed mixed together. So that's pretty much a junkie.
Yeah,
Um,
that it's crazy. I had a roommate once who was in recovery, and of course, I have two sisters that had been on the streets because of meth. Um, and both are actually sober right now. One's been sober for 6 years, the other for I think a year and a half. But never thought that the one that's been sober for a year and a half would be able to kick it, and I'm stoked for her. But I didn't realize how closely those two drugs can mirror each other, not mirror, but how closely they're used together. And my roommate, who was in recovery, was like, "Yeah, man. Sometimes when you're into heroin, sometimes you just need to be up and you need to do stuff. And sometimes when you're really into meth,
right.
you need to come down." So that was a huge light bulb for me. It was like, wow, man, I thought like addiction kind of was a little bit more compartmentalized than that. I didn't realize how broad it could be.
Right, right. Just on heroin, you can't be nodding out all the time, especially for me as a tattoo artist, like nodding out in the middle of a tattoo, that's a bad scene.
Yeah, yeah, that's bad for business, you know. Um, so how what brought you to recovery, and what was the road that led you there? What was the turning moment for you?
Well, I was always, uh, using up and down, like I would use and stop, my whole life through. But
Yeah,
um, towards the end there, it was a health issue.
yeah,
So, um, and that's the way drug addiction is. It's gonna get you somehow. If it's gonna ruin all your family relationships, your job, things like that. Uh, Jails and institutions are always involved, and but if those things don't get you, and as a tattoo artist, it was kind of easy to keep it a habit going because you kind of make cash every day. It's
right,
not like you're going to a job and you get paid every 2 weeks, but you need
right,
it. You need drugs before your payday comes.
yeah,
Um, but you get paid cash every day, so you're able to kind of keep a habit going, and you know, and you don't have a lot of people scrutinizing you. At a tattoo shop, you just go in, you do your thing, and
right.
so. But eventually, it got me in my health. I was diagnosed with congestive heart failure in
Wow,
2004.
wow,
So I struggled with that. Uh, there was meds that I was supposed to be on. And of course, if I started using, then I wasn't taking the meds.
right.
So I was doing severe damage to my heart, and eventually uh, ended up in jail. Um, and I had 3 heart attacks, and I went through
We had three, like, in the space of what amount of time?
within a month.
Jeez, that
Yeah,
that's a hard month, Freddie.
yeah, it
Wow.
was really bad. I mean, so I was already sick. I knew I was sick. I mean, I felt it. So, and I wasn't taking any of my meds, and I was using heroin and speed, and I was strung out pretty bad, and I got arrested. and I was on parole,
Right.
and so I wasn't getting out. But the withdrawals, mixed with the fact that I had this severe heart condition,
Yeah.
just nearly killed me.
Yeah.
I mean, I was so bad. I was in a wheelchair. I couldn't even take a few steps without gasping for air.
Wow.
And I couldn't lay down. I couldn't. You can't lay down because you can't breathe. So I had to be propped up
Yeah.
the whole time, and uh, just not being able to sleep. I mean, I was really bad. I was certain that I was going to die in there. I was certain of it.
How crazy was that? Like trying to come to terms with everything
It
and
was, yeah, it was impossible. One benefit I did have, because I tattooed so many sheriffs,
Mhm.
the deputies, and so they all knew me,
Yeah.
and they would take me out of the hospital and put me in a special dorm,
Yeah.
uh, where the workers were housed, and they'd bring me food, and they'd always keep a close eye on me and stuff, and every time that I went man down, like from the heart attacks, they had me at the hospital really fast, so.
Wow.
But you're looking around and you're seeing people laughing and talking and just living their lives, and I'm sitting there saying, I'm dying, and I did this to myself.
Yeah.
I brought this upon me. You know, uh, so yeah, it's a big head trip. You know.
Wow, man. So how long after the three heart attacks were you still incarcerated for it, and how did your health
Well,
fare during incarceration?
yeah. So it seemed that I was just getting worse and worse. Uh, my experience was quite spiritual. After the second heart attack, I have some religious background, so I have kind of like I had a faith in God, and as you know, the 12-step program is a spiritual program.
Very
We
much.
rely on our higher power, and um, and I remembered a story, of this king, and this prophet went to the king and told him, you're gonna die. Uh, your time is up. Get your affairs in order, and this is a message from God. And then that king went over the prophet's head and went to God himself and asked God for more time, and God gave him 15 more years. So that story just kept coming to my mind, and I felt like, we all pray when we're in trouble and stuff like that, but this time I wanted to talk to God and ask him for more time. And in fact, in order to get to a place where I could be alone, because I was in that dorm, I had to go up these two little flights of stairs. It took me like a half an
I was
hour
saying
just to
that
get up
must
those
be
stairs.
killer. Wow, that must have been insanely difficult.
And when I got up there, I said, God, I can't make any promises because every promise I've ever made, I've broken. But I'm just asking you for a little more time so that I won't die in this wretched county jail, and that I can have this chance to redeem myself. And the next morning, that night, I had the worst night. I was having pain in my chest all night. Uh, I I couldn't sleep. I couldn't lay down. I couldn't breathe. With the congestive heart failure, your lungs aren't getting any oxygen, so you had to take fast little breaths, like just to try to get the oxygen to your body.
Dang,
And
man.
and and then I went man down in the morning, and I was on my way to the hospital again with a heart attack. So by all accounts, I should have just thought, well, my request was denied. you know
Yeah.
but but I felt really different. I felt like the whole time I was in there, I felt like I was going to die. all of a sudden I felt like I was going to live right in the middle of this thing. And so I was in the hospital the longest, that time about 3 weeks.
Jeez.
And with each passing day, I was feeling better and better. And so the doctor said, well, you know, it looks like these meds that we have you on right now are helping. So we're going to send you back to the jail. So they sent me back to the jail, and I just continually got better. I even was able to play a little basketball.
Wow.
I started doing push-ups. And so, you know, every Tuesday, they would send me back to the hospital for them to check my progress. And, you know, when I told the doctor that I was doing push-ups, he was really surprised. He's like, whoa. And then he said, well, you know what? I'm going to have you come back and do all these tests again, you know, the echogram and all the heart tests. So I went back the following Tuesday, took the test. Then the following Tuesday after that, I went, and there was a group of doctors there, and they all took turns listening to my heart and looking at my chart and talking. And the doctor told me after, he goes, well, you know, we've all heard of people's hearts repairing themselves, but here's the first one that we've seen.
Wow.
And he goes, this is really amazing. Let me show you your chart, you know. And
yeah,
he said basically your heart was enlarged nearly out of the cavity, and it was barely pumping and very erratically. So your liver and your lungs were in failure because they weren't getting any oxygen, and your heart was beating at under 10%. He goes, now it appears that your heart has reduced in size and it's beating at 30%, and between 30 and 70% is normal.
Wow.
So, and I told the doctor, I was like, you know what, I believe that, you know, God healed my body and has given me more time. And
wow.
the doctor said, well, I think your body has healed your heart, and your heart has given you more time. And I was like, well, whatever. So, you know, at the same time, you know, and that was a great miracle that happened in my life, you know, recovering from that, you know, heart disease.
Yeah.
You know, and at the same time, you know, I was in there on a parole violation and a new possession of heroin case, and I was looking at going back to prison. You know, my attorney was telling me, you know, the best thing you could do is plead guilty, and they'll give you 2 years. You know, but if you try to fight this, you have no case. You know, they had every right to search you. You're on parole. You know, they said they're going to give you the 4 years. You know.
Yeah.
And but I didn't want to plead guilty. You know, I didn't.
Yeah.
I wanted to go into a rehab. I didn't want to go to prison. And
right.
she was saying, well, they're not going to send you to rehab. The district attorney already said they're not going to send you to rehab. And so I asked my attorney just to get me more time. Plus, I got, you know, more continuances because of my health issue when I was in there, but I was doing better now.
Right.
So, meanwhile, you know, when I go to the county jail, they have big murals inside the jail, and I'm one of the artists that paint all those murals. You know,
oh, cool.
So, you know, the captain there had a special mural that he wanted me to paint. So, and I ended up painting 2 murals in there, and also the captain himself came and asked me if I would do pinstriping on these box cars that they used for boxcar racing as an outreach to inner city kids.
Cool.
And so I did that for him. So before I had to go back to court, I went to the sergeant and I said, do you think the captain will speak to me, you know? And she goes, well, what for? And I was like, I want to see if he'll write a letter of recommendation to the judge for me to go to rehab, you know, because I don't think prison is going to do anything for me. And I really want to, you know, change my life, you know?
Yeah.
And she told me, well, you know, we don't really do that, you know, we don't write recommendation letters. She goes, but I'll talk to the captain and tell him that you want to talk to him. But I never heard back from him, you know, and I went to court and I was about to take the 2 years, and my attorney came and said, well, I don't know what happened, but the judge went through all the files and pulled yours out and said, this guy's going to go to rehab.
Dang.
And that was my second miracle.
That's
And I ended up going to, I ended up going to Beit Teshuva, which is a Jewish rehab. My mother's Jewish.
cool.
And that was the beginning of this journey of recovery that I've been going through. It's just been amazing. These have been the best 10 years of my life. You know, I've never been so focused on my work, and you know,
Yeah,
I
you
was a
are
gangster.
busy. You're a busy guy. We've been trying for like almost 2 months to get this podcast lined up, and you know, I'm glad we're doing it now. But yeah, like you're definitely a busy man. I can account for that for sure.
Yeah, and I love it, you know, and it's just,
Yeah,
and my health is good, and you know, my work is the best that it's ever been. And
nice,
you know, and I'm connected with the rehab. I'm a group leader, you know, so
nice.
I lead group therapy sessions for youngsters that are, you know about the heroin epidemic right now. So,
Yeah, it's
you
you
know,
know, I've lost. Me and my buddy were talking last night actually. During our 20s, we lost a person every year um, to opiates. The heroin epidemic right now is horrible, and uh, you know the president has declared it a state of emergency, but really, I mean, it should have been declared a state of emergency 10 years ago. You know,
yeah,
it's
that's about when this new wave of heroin addiction started. I mean, when I was in the rehab, uh, you know, 10 years ago, it was mostly alcoholics, and there was a few. I can't remember any heroin addicts in there, but we had, you know, a few on speed and different things, benzos and things like that.
yeah,
And then, and you know, so I did a lot of volunteer stuff there, but then all of a sudden, the whole rehab was filled with these young people, and it was mostly older people when I was there too.
yeah,
Um, but all of a sudden, these kids, you know, from 18 to 25, and all heroin addicts, you know, and so the rabbi said, you know what, because they were running amok in that in that there's
yeah,
150 people in that rehab, you know,
yeah,
so we decided to do a group just for young people, and so all the young people were required to attend my group,
yeah.
and that's when I started uh, realizing this new heroin addiction that was going on,
The scope of the
and
problem.
all these kids, yeah, and all these kids, you know, that had like a relative experience, you know, most of them starting with pills, you know, from their parents' medicine cabinet, you know,
100%,
um,
man.
Vi-
100%.
Vicodin and oxycodone and
Percocets, you know.
yeah,
When I was in high school,
and then they,
I graduated class of 97, and right around that time was when people started partying with pills. And people just looked at it as misusing a medicine. They didn't look at it as taking drugs, you know. But yeah, I remember thinking pills, like, why would you party with pills? Like, it just didn't make sense to me, you know. Because before that time, people were partying with the classics, at least for my age, you know, in junior high back then, the stuff that I came across was, you know, cannabis, LSD, mushrooms. Those were the big three going around
right.
when I was younger. Occasionally, you'd hear about tweak, and occasionally you hear about meth or about coke, but heroin was something that they made movies about. At least when I was a little kid.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, same with me. I,
yeah,
I and the average person, you know, just sticking a needle in your arm seems grotesque, you know, like a person's not gonna go out and just start using heroin. For us,
right.
Even being in a gang and all that in a negative environment that I grew up in, you know, as kids we were all we none of us thought we'd ever use heroin. You
Right.
know, it's something, but with taking pills, it doesn't seem like you're doing that bad of a thing. You're just taking some pills, you know,
Right.
and but then but then when you get addicted and you get sick, you're very willing to cross over and use heroin to keep from being sick, you know. So
Well, yeah. I mean, people, people like me, like I can never understand how bad kicking actually is. Getting off the junk, getting off the opiates, because I've never done it. But my roommate that I mentioned earlier, he taught me a lot about addiction and specifically about opiate addiction. But when he first started it, um, he went back to that group of people who he'd been partying with for the last couple of days, after a day or two of not being there because he got sick. And he's like, guys, I don't know what's wrong with me. I'm just feeling sick. And they're like, well, that's because of this. And he's like, what? This makes you sick? Like he didn't even know that opiate withdrawals would make you sick. That's how naive he was getting into it. So I mean, it's just I think there was so little education on what heroin actually was back then too. You know, I didn't know you could smoke it. I thought it was something that was just a needle thing. Um, but yeah,
yeah, and you know, mixed with the sickness, I mean, uh, you know, is the anxiety that's probably in Spanish it's called ansias. Uh, that really gets you where your body just you just can't hold still. You're going crazy. You want to pull your hair out. It's hard to
yeah,
explain that level of anxiety that you go through. Plus the throwing up and not being able to sleep. You know, it's pretty harsh, but the strongest part about it is the mental aspect because
yeah,
I mean, if you're really sick with the flu and all you had to do is get a shot and you're not sick anymore,
yeah,
uh, you know what I mean?
yeah.
So
When it's that when you're that sick and you know that there's just yeah, it's got to be a crazy, combining with the addiction and the desire to want it anyway already. It's hitting you from both sides.
right, and you have this great fear of getting sick, you know, so that's why heroin
Yeah.
addicts are so focused on their next shot, you know, because and they don't care about anything
Right.
because you don't want to get sick, you
Yeah.
know. So it's a chase, you know. You're constantly running to keep from getting sick.
Yeah, and I've heard it at some point with heroin you can be functioning on it as long as you're not too deep in that particular fix, not too deep into it. Like my friend would be at the gym, and or he'd be out doing things and he'd be for him, I mean, every addict is different, every addiction is different. But for him, he could actually be functioning on it. But if he were kicking and out in public, kicking, trying to go somewhere, it was, I can't talk to people. I can't make sense of myself. I don't want to be seen. Like, I shouldn't even be out right now. Like, um, so I mean, I think there's just so many aspects to it that people who have never been there will never understand from firsthand experience. And I think that's why I think conversations like this are important to have, is so that people who have never used heroin can understand the nature of the relapse with it. And also so people can understand how fucking amazing 10 years of sobriety is. I mean, wow, man. I mean, that's hardcore. Like that's really something. Like that's amazing. So,
Yeah, thank you.
but
I give all the credit to God though.
there you go.
But thank you.
There you go. Um, what do you think, other than the arrival of pills on the scene? What do you think has brought back this new wave of heroin use? Is
Well,
there anything in particular that you can kind of give people the heads up for, or people to be wary of, like is that with that or anything or?
You know, it 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 all comes down to wanting to feel good. You
Yeah.
know, and heroin is, when it all boils down, it's a feel good drug. You know, and it seems to, it gives you a false sense of security. You know, like you feel good. You're detached from the problems that you face in everyday life. You know, all of a sudden, those things aren't important to you anymore. You know,
Right.
so uh, being an addict myself, you know, uh, I know firsthand how it feels, and it's false. You know, it's a false sense of security, but
Yeah.
you know, then, at first it seems really good, and you feel really good, and you got this warm rush over your whole body, and you feel like you're more sociable, and you know,
Yeah.
uh, just all those things. But then the dark side comes, the addiction and the
Yeah.
overdoses, and you know, and you realize that you're involved with this monster, or like they called it, a monkey on your back.
Yeah.
Um, so,
I
but there's nothing you can do at that point because you're strung out and you don't want to get sick.
yeah. I read the book Scar Tissue by Anthony Kiedis, and of course he talks about what the Red Hot Chili Peppers were doing, you know, while they were writing these songs and what was going on in all of their lives during these times. But a lot of that book is about his addiction to first first cocaine, then cocaine and heroin, then heroin and meth and speedballs. And it like for people who have never experienced that and who maybe they have an addict in their life that they love or something like that. It's one of those books that it's not going to dive hardcore into addiction, so it's not something that you can read and then feel deeply educated about addiction on. But what it does is it takes an addiction and makes it kind of, it humanizes it a little bit, and you can see through, because most people love the Red Hot Chili Peppers and they remember when these songs come out, and so you are seeing what he was doing with his addiction in his life during these songs, and it's a rough read, and it's a rough road he went down to get to sobriety, and he still fights it every day. But that book for me really, um, for me that was it was an awesome book about Anthony Kiedis and the Red Hot Chili Peppers. But for me, it was also, I felt like it educated me a little bit on how an addiction can entrench itself into someone's life who's got so much going on. Like he wasn't just sitting in an apartment somewhere isolated. He was on tour. He was writing music. He was doing things. But um, what are some? I always tell people, if you're 40 years old and you haven't had your life affected either firsthand, secondhand, or thirdhand through addiction, then you're lucky. For people who find themselves in that situation, especially, and a lot of my listeners are, growing up in Mesa, Arizona in the 80s and 90s, it was white Mormon demographic. Now it's much more culturally diverse and a lot bigger, and not quite the small town it was back when I was growing up in it. But for so a lot of the people that I know from this town that listen to this, it's possible that they've never experienced someone in their family or a friend who's been an addict. If that's the case, how would you suggest that people who may be going through something like this for the first time with a loved one, how should they educate themselves other than going to meetings?
You know, it's kind of a tough question because it's so frustrating. I can imagine for someone that's never been an addict or never used drugs to all of a sudden experience a loved one, uh, you know, going through an addiction, because uh, you think it's much easier than it is, and
Right.
and that they should just stop. Um, and assume that when they do stop that they're going to stay, clean,
And so many people feel
they
like
can't
it's a
understand.
choice, 3, 4 years into an addiction. And so many people still feel like it's a choice that the addict's making. They don't
Yeah, right,
understand that the choice has ended years ago.
right. So I think people should you know try to understand just how difficult it is for an addict going through that experience, and also realize that there is help out there, that there are treatment centers and methods of treatment that can really work, like the 12-step program, and many others, therapy, things like that. So um, with the availability of these treatment centers these days, when I was younger and on heroin, there was no rehab that you could check into that I knew
Yeah,
of, or ever even heard of, So
right.
there are there are a lot of professional people recognizing the problem, realizing that there is treatment for it, and devoting their lives to this treatment and this endeavor to help addicts to you know not overcome addiction, because you never will. You'll always be an addict,
Yeah.
but to to have a life with sobriety, you know, through the process of therapy and 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 treatment.
Yeah. Well, just to have a life, like a fulfilling, amazing life that's not encumbered by addiction and everything that comes with addiction, all the horrible things that addiction creates, you know. Um, no,
Right.
I think it's amazing that you've got 10 years of sobriety behind you, man, especially like with the places you've been, man. It's it's amazing how people can get clean, after years and years of fighting, they can do it. They can they can win still. Man,
Yeah,
I
there's
never
help out there.
I never thought my sisters would be clean again, man. Like I mean, I used to turn my cell phone off at night, and in God, it was probably 2003, 2004 when this all started with my family, and that kept me from turning it off at night, thinking that I would get that call. Now I don't even think about it. It's something I've done for years. I leave my cell phone on 24 hours a day. But there used to be a time when I didn't, and it was the fear of missing a call um, from my sisters, either a distress call or they're in a dangerous situation, and maybe I can help them, improve. Maybe they, or the call that they had overdosed or even passed. But yeah, man, it's from someone who's been on the other side of it, from the family member, like 10 years sobriety is awesome, man. What other than tattooing and work with your career, did you pick up any other new hobbies or anything like that to help you with your sobriety and occupy your time or anything like that?
I'm pretty busy with my tattoo work, and then the other things related to it, like we just got this exhibit up and running at the Natural History Museum in Los Angeles,
Oh yeah, tell me about
which
that. Yeah, let's talk about that.
it's a show that they started in Paris, France. It was probably the first time that a museum uh, acknowledged tattooing in any way, and they
Yeah,
thoroughly covered the history of tattooing. Then the exhibit went to Chicago, and and then from Chicago it came to LA. And when they brought it to LA, they realized the impact of LA tattooing on the whole tattoo world. So
okay.
they did a special exhibit on the history of tattooing in LA, and of course ours, the East LA phenomenon, the black and gray, it
Yeah,
was a big part of that exhibit. But the whole exhibit is just phenomenal. And to have the Natural History Museum, the one in LA is just
Yeah.
such an amazing museum. To have them, focus on our field, is just
Yeah.
quite an honor.
That's gotta
And
feel good, man. That's awesome.
it's just called tattoo.
Okay.
And and they just have so much stuff in that museum. And some of the tattooing that's been done all over the world, the Japanese
Hmm.
and the Polynesian, uh, even this amazing style of the tattooing they do in Thailand. These Buddhist monks that do this tattooing, and and uh, and all these people have these tattoos, and once a year they come and they have a festival, and the Buddhist monks kind of like recharge their tattoos because all their tattoos represent prayers and
Okay.
protection and different things
Okay.
like that. And and they just have this huge ceremony with thousands of people, and they're covered with tattoos, and they're going into trance. You know,
That's cool. So as they're getting their tattoo artwork touched up, it's actually touched tattoo, or it's actually recharging the protection value and the prayer value as well.
right? But they're not getting the tattoo touched up.
No, okay, I misunderstood then. Okay. So they're
Yeah,
okay. Either
they
way,
just
that's cool.
they just yeah they just come together for a ceremony where the Buddhist monks do these prayers and splash water, and people go into trance,
Okay.
and they just have a ceremony to recharge their existing tattoos.
Okay. That's cool.
That's quite a phenomenon. I learned a lot. They really covered. Uh, Tattooing goes back that they know of for sure. Um, like over 6,000 years.
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
With the discovery of the Iceman.
Yeah.
Uh,
Itzy or I,
yeah, Itzy,
yeah, I know who you're talking about. He was murdered.
and yeah, he was murdered.
That's
They
crazy.
they discovered a lot of amazing things about him, but
Yeah.
one of the amazing things was that he was tattooed,
Yeah. He had
and he
something
was
like
tattooed on his
15.
lower. Yeah,
Like,
and he was tattooed on his back, which means that there was a an artist involved. It wasn't something he just
right.
did to himself.
Right. That's an interesting perspective I hadn't considered. Yeah. No, he was heavily tattooed, like 15 of them or something like that.
Right.
That's so
And
cool.
since then, there's been dozens of mummified bodies that they found to be tattooed in Peru, Egypt, so
Yeah.
Mexico.
I had an
So
interesting
tattooing goes way back.
I had an interesting story with a tattoo, identifying a tattoo or seeing an interesting tattoo in a unique situation. I got to share with you. I had a job where I worked for an airplane transport company, and a lot of times they would take apart old Beechcraft or Cessna or specialized aircraft, and they'd haul them across country in these flatbed trucks. A lot of times these were aircrafts from like the 70s, 80s, or even the 60s. A lot of times they would get pulled apart and scrapped out. But another big part of what this company did was when these airplanes go down, after the coroners would come and remove the bodies, they needed someone to pick up the airplane wreckage. So they'd haul us on a helicopter, and they'd drop us, or they would land, and we'd hike into where it was, and then wearing long gloves and protective clothing, we'd fill up a giant bean bag, and then a helicopter would come in and they'd rope this stuff out. And I don't know what part of the coroners did a good job for the most part, but you're going to see stuff when you're coming into a wreckage site and you can hear coyotes just yipping and barking and yelping and stuff, and you're scaring them off. Coyotes aren't curious about wreckage; they look for food. Um, and so I came across this. I don't know what part of the body this was, but this was a piece of skin, roughly about, we'll say if it was a square, it was 6 inches by 6 inches, a little bit bigger, you know. but oblong piece of skin, and it had tattoos on it. It was from whoever had been flying in the plane, obviously. But yeah, that's the eeriest, goriest, most gothic tattoo story I've got going on there. So, but it was an interesting perspective. It was like, wow, someone was that was someone's skin, and that was someone's artwork, and someone probably spent a lot of time going through the process of picking that out, and looking at artists and looking at artists' work, and there it is now. You know,
Right.
but yeah, man, tattoos are amazing, man. It seems like on every continent there's been cultures that have had them throughout history, for the most part, and it's crazy how mainstream they've become over the last 20, 30 years. Now you have soccer moms getting visible tattoos behind their ear or on their wrist, where how many years ago that would have been like, whew, you know, that,
Right.
that's got to be an interesting shift to have seen.
Yeah, right. And we one of the things, back in the day when I first started professional with Ed Hardy and the rest of the crew, one of the things that we really wanted to achieve was to get people to see tattooing as a form of art, because
Right.
there was an argument, people would look at tattoos and say, well, that's not art. They didn't accept it as art. And but today it's not an argument at all
Right.
because of the fantastic artwork that's being done. Everybody agrees that it's a beautiful form of art.
Yeah.
So I would say that it's been great to realize that objective. We want to get people to see tattooing as a form of art. We wanted our tattoos to look artfully done,
Yeah.
uh, and so that's been realized and accomplished. So I'm
That's
very
amazing.
happy about that.
That is awesome. Yeah. And to see it's not just the quality of the art that has stepped up with tattooing in general in the last 30, 40, 50 years, but also, just I'm not being very articulate here, but any artist can write on or can draw on canvas, or not every artist can sculpt in clay, perhaps, but when you're talking about skin, you're talking about a living medium that is moving, and all the time. You're talking
And it
about
hurts.
something that
It
would hurt.
hurts and it bleeds.
Yeah. Well, and you're talking about a medium that is unlike any other canvas for any, even a mountain is just a mountain. It just sits there. I mean, it's huge and amazing, and like projects like Rushmore and Crazy Horse are wonderful and incredible. But skin is there's no other medium like it. And I guess it took me, after talking to my buddy John Hansen is the tattoo artist I follow these days with so many. As I digress here, these days with so many tattoo artists online, for me to follow them, I kind of have to know them. So I follow you, I follow John Hansen, I follow Adrian Dominique, I follow um, Rodney Taylor, and then I follow Carly Cleary. Um, so I don't follow a ton, but it took me a while talking to John and talking about tattooing before I even realized how crazy of a canvas skin is to even work with. You know, um, where I feel like a lot of that knowledge is being more accepted widely these days, because not only is the good artwork getting out there, but with the increased interest in tattooing, people are wanting to learn more about different aspects of tattooing. Um, so yeah, that's kind of an interesting thing too. So
And that's all good for us.
yeah, what do you think about shows like Ink Master and things like that?
I don't mind them. You know, at first I was a little bit worried. I was thinking, wow, they're gonna like over popularize this, and it's going to be one of those things that everybody loves one minute and hates the next.
Yeah.
But you know, but taking into account uh, the mystery aspect of tattooing, the fact that it hurts, the fact that the imagery is still somewhat dark and underground.
Yeah.
I don't think that that can ever be taken away. And so um, shows like Ink Masters has actually, I think, helped the industry.
Cool.
And I was on there as a guest judge before, so
Oh, were you? I haven't seen that.
um,
I've only seen maybe 7 or 8 episodes through the years. I'm not really into reality TV except for Survivor and Naked Afraid, but those shows are on a whole new level. But yeah, I guess I have a namesake on Ink Master. Jesse Smith was one of the contestants, and every now and again, like, well, if I YouTube anything, like he's the one that pops up, Jesse Smith, and then a born again Christian preacher. So, but it's always interesting.
yeah, but that was the season. That's season 4. That
Uh,
was the season that I was a guest judge.
oh, were you?
So
Oh, cool.
yeah, so I judged the Jesse Smith's work and the preacher.
Okay. Well, no, this preacher, um, what wasn't on the
Well, there was
show?
a Catholic priest.
Was there?
Oh, actually, I'm sorry. Jesse Smith was the artist. The
Yeah.
Catholic priest was the recipient.
Oh, okay. No, there's like on YouTube, there's a Christian preacher named Jesse Smith that will come up if you type my name in there, and so that's what I was referring to.
Oh,
But that's funny that he tattooed a priest. That's that's kind of cool.
okay.
So
Yeah, yeah, it was amazing.
yeah,
But anyways,
it's interesting how many religious tattoo, how many religious themed tattoos there are out there, and amazing concepts too, especially when you get into some of the more obscure stories of the Bible and things like that. Just different artists' interpretation of them through tattoos even for someone who's not religious like myself, it's pretty incredible work to see.
right. Well, I know I did this interview for the Jewish Journal,
Uh-huh.
and all the mainstream religions, frown on tattooing.
Yeah.
Jews don't like it, but they especially don't like it because of their experience through the Holocaust and getting numbers
Yeah,
tattooed on them.
I can understand why they
And
would be a little sensitive to that. I think that's, yeah, I can understand that. That,
and
yeah.
Christians frown upon it because they feel like you're defacing because there's a passage that says your body is the temple of the Holy Spirit,
Yeah, that's how
and
Mormons feel about it
so
too. Yeah.
yeah. So, but there's a passage in the Old Testament about the tefillin. The tefillin, I don't know if you've ever seen Orthodox Jews. There's like a leather box with a leather strap, and they wrap it around their hand and their forehead, and they'll have this little leather black box sticking out of their forehead and their hand. And
is that a reminder that is that the
yes,
reason they do that? Yeah, I have seen
yeah,
that.
it's a prayer that they say called the tefillin, and it comes from a passage where God tells his people that he will print the name of Jerusalem on his
On
hand
his
and
hands,
on
yeah.
his forehead,
Yeah.
and so that they'll know that he'll never forsake them. So in essence, it's saying that God tattooed, his hand and his forehead.
Yeah. Yeah. Mormons get a little of course there are Mormons with tattoos, and there are, you know, you there aren't any really restrictions. They advise you not to. Well, really they tell you not to, but people do it anyway. But there are certain groups of Mormons who will flip out and be like, "Oh, it's the mark of the beast," or it's whatever. It's like, come on, people, it's art. There's, and
Right.
the big thing is they call it, Mormons build their temples. There's that Mormon temple in downtown LA. God, it's not on Sunset, but it's right around that area. It's a little more,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's on Santa Monica.
yeah, yeah. But they a lot of times they'll equate tattoos to spray painting the temple. And it's like, come on, man. Like I was raised Mormon. I went on a Mormon mission to England and Wales, so I have been through the temple, and there are murals all all over that, all over the temple. So I think that's a pretty squishy argument there.
Right.
Um, but I think tattoos are great. I love tattoos. The after I get my like I told you, I think about them for years before I get them. But once my leg is finished, I'm going to do my chest and then my sleeve. My chest, when I have all planned out, there's an old Cherokee proverb where a grandpa and his son are sitting there talking, and the grandpa is explaining him the parable of the two wolves. Are you familiar with it?
Yes.
Yeah. I'm going to get that concept tattooed on my chest, but instead of wolves, they're going to be two lions facing off. And they're going to have the same colors, same color hair, same color manes, and they're going to look the same, except for one is going to be big and muscular, and one is going to be skinny and starved. And the big muscular one, they're all going to have their wounds and their injuries in the same places, but the bigger one, his wounds will look a little more scabbed over, and the skinnier one's wounds will look fresh and bloody. Um, the bigger one will look well groomed and a little more, you know, a little more put together. Where the younger one or the skinnier one's going to look scraggly and scruffy, and the bigger one will look calm, while the skinnier one looks dangerous, like it's on its last limb. I'm just going to have them circling each other, just kind of eyeing each other up, you know, um, because that's a concept that's changed my life. I have a tendency to get a little angry about stupid things, and gets me in stupid situations and where I have to apologize and make restitution. But when I came across that parable, it hit me so hard where I was like, man, that would be amazing to be able to see that every time I looked in the mirror, as a reminder. But yeah, that's the next big project I want to get started on is my chest with those two lions, and I'm gonna have John do it here in Mesa. So, but
Yeah.
yeah, man,
That's the beautiful thing about tattooing these days is, uh, you know, traditional tattooing back in the day, you had a there was a limited amount of options. You go in and you'd pick a tattoo off the wall,
yeah,
and you try to get one that means something to you. But now these days with the custom tattoo, and people just like your vision of your tattoo, everybody has this beautiful vision of something that they want to say about themselves
right.
through this tattoo, something that's important to them.
So, Freddie, you've got a book.
So actually, the book is out. It's called Smile Now, Cry Later.
Okay.
Um, Guns, Gangs, and Tattoos: My Life in Black and Gray, and that's kind of what it's about.
All right.
People ask, why'd you write a book? And you know, uh, what's interesting about your story that you would want to write a book? And you know, I knew that I grew up in that Chicano Cholo uh, environment. People have a great interest in the Chicano culture with the lowrider cars and the
Oh yeah.
style of dress. Even in Japan, they have lowriders over there.
Yeah.
Like, so I had that, and I thought that was of interest to people. Then there's the whole California prison life. People are interested in that, the racial divides, the violence. There's all kinds of shows on prison life. So people were interested in that, and I had that story to tell. Then of course there's the tattoo thing, pioneering a style of tattooing, what went down in East LA, how that all started. So I had that, and then, but most of all, and the real reason why I wrote the book is it's a book about redemption, and recovery and new life. And hopefully through this book, I can inspire people and they can see someone that was as far down to the curb as you could be and still found new life and a new beginning. And hopefully it could reach people and and show them that they can accomplish the same thing.
Very cool.
So again, the name is Smile Now, Cry Later.
Is it
Uh,
available in Barnes and Noble?
yeah, you can order it on. It's at Barnes and Noble, and it's on
That was
Amazon.
gonna be my next
Uh,
question. What
yeah,
about
so it's
is it available on like audio book programs like
yes,
Audible? Okay, cool. All
yeah,
right.
it's available also on Kindle.
Okay, perfect. All
So
right,
it's out there.
Freddie,
We've gotten a lot of good feedback.
I'm gonna commit to you to read your book and also review it on my YouTube channel. Um, I'm
Thank
gonna,
you.
yeah, man. We got to do this again sometime soon.
Anytime you want me on the show just to chat, I'm here.
I love it, man. Before I let you go, I always ask people what kind of music they're rocking out to these days.
You know, I I still I love that Seattle scene. You
Oh
know,
yeah,
I love the grunge.
yeah,
You know, Stone Temple Pilots and
yeah,
uh, so I love listening to all that.
yeah.
So at the shop, we listen to a wide variety of music from country to some of this new hipster stuff that doesn't make any sense to me at all. But
Yeah.
so and they make fun of me because I always want to listen to grunge, but
Dude,
I love it.
I
That's the
love
music I
grunge.
love.
I was a promoter for 7 years up in Salt Lake when all that new hipster music was coming out, so I saw the rise of it. But my roots are in grunge, and just good hard rock and roll. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, man. Any shout outs or plugs that you want to give before we wrap it up?
Um, maybe my Instagram. If people want to see the work I'm doing and the events I'm having, they can go on Instagram. It's Freddy FREDDY underscore Negrete NEGRETE. Or you can visit my website, freddynegrete.com.
Cool.
And so,
Well, sir, I'm glad that you are celebrating 10 years of sobriety, and I look forward to another 10 years, and look forward to getting into your book. I'm gonna take notes, and I'm gonna ask you questions about it. Okay?
yeah, read the book and have me back on.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
We'll discuss it.
Absolutely. For sure. For sure. I look forward to it, man. I'll talk to you soon. Thanks for reaching out, man, and thanks for coming on the Deep Thinkers podcast. Planet Earth, thank you for tuning in, listening to Freddy Negrete's story. Um, Follow him on Instagram and definitely check out his book. And above all, be excellent to each other.
All right, man.